Okay, we're going to get underway. I want to thank everybody for joining us today and welcome you all to our webinar. This is one of Wild Apricot's monthly expert webinars, and today we're honored to have the co-authors of The Happy, Healthy Nonprofit, Beth Kanter and Aliza Sherman, and they're going to show us how the top nonprofit leaders avoid burnout. As someone who has suffered burnout before, I'm personally looking forward to learning from Beth and Aliza today, and I gather that many of you are as well. We'll bring Beth and Aliza on shortly. In the meantime, I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name is Donald Cowper, and I'm on the Wild Apricot content team. And beside me is my colleague on the content team, Terry Ibell. He'll be on chat to help with any technical issues you might have, so use that if you're having any trouble. And feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar to Beth and Aliza. And to do that, you can just use the chat box that you should see on your screen. I'll let you know that we're recording this session, and we'll be sending you an email in the next day or two with a link where you can find the recording. So stay tuned for that. And also let you know that by attending, you're eligible to earn 1 CAE credit. And so today's webinar is being brought to you by us here at Wild Apricot. I know that many of our customers are on with us today, so I want to welcome you all. But I also know that we have many people here who aren't familiar with Wild Apricot, and I want to welcome you as well. And to introduce you to Wild Apricot, which is membership management software. It's an all-in-one solution for anyone running a membership organization, and that's because you can manage your member and contact database. You can run your events, build your website, process all your payments, and so on. And for many of our customers, it's a lifesaver, saving them hours a day in administrative tasks and freeing them up to focus on what they really want to do, which is fulfill their organization's mission and purpose. We're 10 years old at this point, and for the last 4 years, we've been ranked as the #1 rated membership management software solution on the market. And I'll say, while we pride ourselves on helping people with great software, we're also a leading provider of free educational content, which you can find on our website and blog, and in webinars like today's. So if any of you have questions about Wild Apricot, we're happy to answer them at the end of the webinar. In fact, we'll have one of our coaches joining us at the end to help deal with any questions you might have. So now let's get on with the show. Our presenters today are the co-authors of the critically acclaimed book, The Happy, Healthy Nonprofit. It's been praised by some big names like Arianna Huffington of the Huffington Post, which you can see there. I encourage you all to get a copy of the book, and Terry will send a link in the chat window there where you can find the book on Amazon. So now, let's introduce you to Beth Kanter and Aliza Sherman, and I'm going to pass over presenter control to Beth and Aliza now, so just bear with us while we do that.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Donald, for that great pass of the baton. This is Beth Kanter.
Thank you. And Aliza Sherman.
We're actually
so you can hear the difference in our voices.
Right, and we're actually in the same place for once. So that a little bit about me. I've worked in the nonprofit sector 35 years. I've dedicated my whole career to nonprofits and social change and activism. And 25 years ago, I was lucky enough to have a front row seat at the creation of a field, and that's when nonprofits started to discover the internet for their mission-driven work back in the early 1990s, although Aliza was on there several years before, and actually met Aliza back in the early 1990s, and she'll talk about that in a moment. My day job mostly is as a professional facilitator and trainer, and I've worked with thousands of nonprofits and individual social change activists on how to use networks, social media, leadership development, and more recently tech wellness on every continent of the world except for Antarctica. And those are my subject matter expertise areas, but I also have a passion for participatory facilitation processes and instructional design. I spent the last 5 years as visiting scholar at the Packard Foundation, where I wrote my 2 previous books, The Network Nonprofit and Measuring the Network Nonprofit, both with co-authors, The Network Nonprofit with Allison Fine and Measuring the Network Nonprofit with Katie Payne, which won the Terry McAdams Nonprofit Book Award back in 2013. I'm adjunct professor at Middlebury College, and my clients include foundations and nonprofits. And I'll turn it over to Aliza.
Well, great. Yes, so Beth mentioned that we've known each other since 1995. So back then I started the first woman-owned internet company called Cybergirl, Inc., and the first organization to help women learn about the internet from other women called Web Girls International. And Beth was a Web Girls member up in Boston. So I've written 11 books. This is my 11th book, The Happy Healthy Nonprofit, but I've written 10 other books mostly about the internet and business. I work with for-profit companies and non-profit companies, nonprofits. I have for 25 plus years. So when I started Cybergirl, my clients were a combination of companies that were trying to reach women and organizations on breast cancer awareness and a lot of other women-oriented issues. So I travel around speaking about the internet, and more recently, meaning the last 5 to 6 years, about tech wellness and the importance of taking care of ourselves in relation to our technology. So there's a lot of that in the book and in this presentation. I'll mention a few of those things as well. But let's get on with the presentation.
Great. So we're going to talk about 3 different topics, and we're going to leave room for questions in between the topics. And we want to encourage you, if you have questions, if you have insights that you would like to share, please type them in the chat box, and we'll try to stop along the way. So our 3 topics, we're going to first look at common sources of burnout in the nonprofit sector. We're going to learn about stress reduction strategies for yourself and your team. And we're also going to talk a little bit about how you bring this idea of self-care into the nonprofit workplace, something that we call We Care. And Aliza will talk about that a little bit more deeply in a moment. So if you happen to also be tweeting and multitasking, we have a hashtag out there on Twitter called HappyHealthyNP. Please feel free to do that. And our metric for success, being a measurement geek, is that you identify one self-care habit to continue to build or to start and practice and bring into your workplace. So before we get underway, we wanted to find out a little bit about you and some of your challenges around work-life balance. So we're going to queue up, Donald's going to queue up a user poll. And there we go. So what is your main challenge in terms of work-life balance? Is it finding time for self-care? Juggling work, family, and me time? A demanding job that requires all my attention? Toxic workplace culture? Or something else? And people ask, can I check off all of them? You can actually only pick one, so pick the one that you feel is most accurate or pressing. Well, Lisa, what do you think we're going to get?
You know, we always end up with a very interesting result. The result is usually that one of them bubbles up to the top, and it's always the same one.
And it looks like it's happening again.
Oh, good. Oh, see, there you go.
So I don't know, Donald, if the poll is done. I know we're seeing kind of the results bubble in real time. I don't know if those, what participants are seeing. There we go.
Aha! There it is again. Yes, juggling work, family, and me time is always at the top. So I think it's extremely telling and timely, we would hope for our book, because we do address a lot of this throughout the book with real stories from professionals at nonprofits across the country and Canada too.
Great. So I'm trying to flip to the next slide, but the user, oh, it just went away. Now I can flip to the next. Okay. Hello.
Unmuted.
So it looks like we're just having trouble with getting Aliza's mic hooked up here. So hold on. Okay.
Okay, great.
There we go. Thank you.
There we go.
Okay, you're there.
So
Okay, great.
I'm just going to talk a little bit about the book as a framework for the presentation, and briefly say that the Happy Healthy Nonprofit is a manifesto for a mindset and culture shift in the nonprofit sector. And so we're starting the conversation around the importance of self-care for nonprofit professionals to help avoid burnout and to gain more sustaining energy for your work and your life. But we also talk about it more globally, about the organization itself and how organizations need to pay attention to and commit to encouraging individuals to support self-care. We call that we care, the collective version of self-care. And by engaging in we care, you reduce burnout and you improve your outcomes. But let's talk a little bit more about burnout.
Yeah, so burnout is really common in the nonprofit sector. I probably don't need to say that to the folks that are in the call. And there's many reasons why burnout is so common in our sector. I can think of a few just right off the bat. You know, overworking due to a lack of resources, the workflow that exceeds our collective capacity, which results in having us overwork to deliver what we need to get done, or else having so many competing priorities that we're not unable to prioritize. This sort of feeling of being indispensable, especially if we're serving stakeholders that are in very severe situations, you know, in disaster recovery, refugee, and especially in human rights activism. I've seen that a lot as I've traveled around the world training activists. Or else it could be embedded in the organization's culture, the toxic executive director or the toxic board, which also creates that overworking syndrome. So I think at the bottom of this is it's the passion that many of us as nonprofit professionals feel for our work, and that's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, that passion keeps us going in the face of difficult challenges. But on the other hand, we can be so driven that we don't stop and refuel or even notice that we're experiencing burnout. And so this mindset and subsequent behavior is what keeps us from strengthening our resilience muscles. So just, you know, if you look at the cartoon that's on this book, on the slide, you know, I think it sort of sums it up. Here, it's an executive director of a nonprofit. He's in the emergency room. The doctor's leaning over him, and he's saying, "Grandpa, deadline, due on Thursday." So that's kind of like our mindset that, you know, we sacrifice everything for our cause. And that has consequences. As part of the research for the book, we interviewed hundreds of nonprofit professionals, and we learned about their burnout stories and people who worked themselves literally to death. We even got, I think, PTSD. It makes me really stressed to even say that, and I start messing up the order of the words by hearing all these stories. And so the point we really want to make with this book is that your work is really important, your stakeholders are really important, and you can go in for the long haul. You can do better results if you just shift your mind and think about self-care as part of doing the work.
So burnout. Let's talk about the definition of burnout, which is right there on the screen. This is the clinical definition, and we probably all have experienced too many demands, too few resources, and too little recovery time. But the thing about burnout is the symptoms are so insidious, and they are often mistaken for something else or ignored because they don't seem like such a big deal on their own. But have you experienced some of these symptoms of impending burnout? Fatigue, insomnia, forgetfulness, impaired concentration, increased illness or loss of appetite, feelings of anxiety or hopelessness, depression, anger, even being irritable and short-tempered at work and at home could be a sign that you're stressed out and burning out. And in the book, on our website, we provide some assessment tools that you can take a look at. What's the environment like around you, how you're responding to stress, how your burnout level looks, and activities that could be antidotes to burnout. And there's other measurements as well. Beth has a great one.
And it's called the, let's see if we can flip the slide, Personal Craziness Index, or PCI. Okay, so this theory framework comes from, of all places, the addiction literature from a psychologist named Peter Carnes. Okay, so craziness are small behaviors or warning signs that you may be on your way to burnout, or that your life-work balance is totally out of whack. And that's when you get so caught up in the cosmic importance of your work that you don't notice that you're forgetting your phone charger, misplacing keys, making careless mistakes, or maybe there's other external manifestations of it. And for me, it's dishes in the sink, okay? Now, every morning I try to do light housework before, I get going on my work routine. And if I have dishes piling up in the sink, it means that I'm not taking that time, that it means for me that I'm totally stressed out, that, life balance is getting out of whack, and it's time to hit the pause button. So think for a moment, what's your personal craziness index? And even type it into the chat. Aliza, what's yours?
Well, mine is when I leave to go to a meeting, and then I realize I've forgotten something, so I go back in to get back in the car, realize I forgot something else, go back to get it, get back in the car. This can happen 3, 4, 5, 6 times before I literally can get on the road. At that point, I realize I'm overwhelmed, I'm overstressed, and my forgetfulness is at an all-time high. And that helps me realize I need to slow down and pay more attention and breathe so that I'm fully supplied before I walk out that door.
Great. Well, I don't see in the chat or in the questions other personal craziness. Oh, here we go. Not making time with my son, or who reminds me that we didn't have time. Oh, making family time. Okay, that's a great one. We've also heard people having the laundry pile up. Forgetting that phone charger is a big one. But anyway, so think about what your personal craziness index is and be mindful of that when it starts to appear in your life. And take it as a sign that you need to practice self-care. So self-care starts with you, okay? So the one definition of self-care that comes from the World Health Organization, they describe it as what people do for themselves to establish and maintain health, prevent and deal with illness. And so that definition implies that self-care is, about just health and wellness, but it really goes beyond that. It's about revitalization. It's about building your resilience muscle. It includes any deliberate and consistent habits that you create to enhance your overall well-being. Now, if you were to read the self-care literature, the most frequent metaphor for self-care is what we hear when we get into an airplane and we're about to take off. The flight attendant tells us to put on our oxygen mask first before helping others. And so that's an idea around that you need to make the time and to put self-care into your life, because you're not going to be any good to yourself, to your family, to your organization's mission, to the stakeholder, miserable, burned out, depressed, and completely useless. So, so in the book, we look at self-care in different ways, and Aliza will explain that.
So one of the frameworks we used to talk about self-care and where in your life you can apply self-care. It's not just a work thing here. We divvied it up into 5 spheres of happy, healthy living. And each of these areas of your life, you have relationships going on. And those relationships need to be tended to. So the first is your relationship with yourself. The second, your relationship with others. The third, your relationship to your environment, both the environment that you can control and how to fortify yourself against environmental factors that cause you stress and burnout that you can't control. Then the fourth is work and money. Both of those are linked. You cannot really separate work from money. The fifth is rather recent. We didn't used to talk about our relationship with our technology, one of my favorite topics. But that is another sphere of your life. And how you relate to your technology can have a major impact on your happiness and healthiness quotient. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later.
Whoops.
So one of the things that we highly recommend is writing down a self-care plan. This can be done as an individual, or it can be done through the work yourself, through your organization, leading, guiding a self-care plan exercise. But your self-care plan starts with assessing what is causing you stress, how you react to it, and looking at options for the areas that need to be addressed, prioritizing those options, and figuring out how you're going to take steps to address it. What activities are you going to engage in? What habits do you need to change? As you do this, you may have this huge laundry list, but what we recommend is that you keep it simple and as short as you can so it's manageable, so it's not overwhelming, because how many of us have made some overwhelming promise to ourselves and just couldn't follow through? But writing it down is a great first step.
Great, but you want to get from the writing to the doing. So practicing self-care is really about habit change. You know, again, how many of you have made New Year's resolutions? You know, 45% of Americans, according to the Lou Harris poll, do. But then a mere few weeks later, only 8% have kept them. So that's because they failed to establish, you know, that particular activity or goal as a habit. So, so in the book, there's a lot of resources about all these different activities that you could practice, and even in your self-care, if you kept it simple and just picked one habit around each of the 5 spheres, that's still a lot to do. So we looked a lot at the habit change literature, and I'm based here in Silicon Valley, right down the road from Stanford University, and I was lucky enough to interview BJ Fogg, who runs a lab over at Stanford, and he's an expert in habit change, and he's developed this framework and practice called the Tiny Habits Program, okay? And so the way it works is that you pick a habit, and you have to make it tiny. It's not like you're going to walk 5 miles every day right off the bat. You might say, I'm going to just walk for 10 minutes a day. And the next important thing is to find a spot or find a trigger during the day, during your routine, that will remind you or prompt you to practice that habit, okay? And so you might set a habit, you might make it tiny, but then you might not practice it. And so you shouldn't beat yourself up. You should say, I didn't find the right trigger. So in establishing the habit, you're just really training the cycle of making the habit tiny, finding the right place in your day or evening to do it, and start practicing it consistently. So to give you an example about how this works, I at one point thought I should start meditating because that might help with some stress. So I said, I'm going to meditate. Well, of course, that wasn't a tiny habit. And then I came across, Headspace, and Aliza will talk about some apps like Headspace. But it's basically can give you a 2-minute guided meditation when you're overwhelmed at work. And I thought, wow, I can do that. I can meditate for 2 minutes. And of course, I didn't do it, and because I didn't have the right trigger. But every morning, I make coffee, and I have to push a button and wait for my coffee to brew, and so I figured that that's a great time to practice some meditation. So you push the button, the coffee brews, and you meditate for a couple minutes. And so that got me into at least trying meditation, and then I was able to establish a habit in other places in my schedule. So write a self-care plan, and then pick a habit to change and make it a tiny habit.
So in terms of tiny habits and moving forward, we also talk about focusing on some fundamental needs that we have as human beings. These are the areas that all of us require, and when we're stressed out or burned out, these are the areas that suffer first and often suffer the most. So we call it the wellness triad: sleep, nutrition, and fitness. You cannot do away with these things. You will not survive. But how many of you are slacking in one of these areas? So if we had to pick one of these areas that you would address, Beth, what would that be?
I think it would be sleep. Sleep. Protect your sleep, okay? Getting enough sleep, I think, is the secret to resilience, okay? And, in our society, I think we have this thing where our lack of sleep, I'm so busy, I had to work, all evening, and I had to get up at 3 a.m. to finish this big project. I think we wear our lack of sleep as a badge of honor, when in reality, it's a total lack of self-respect, okay? So when you're sleep deprived, when you're skimping on your needed sleep, it does not allow you to perform for your best, for your organization's mission or your stakeholders. It's the equivalent to being cognitively impaired, or another word for it is like showing up drunk to work, okay? And so how much sleep do you need, okay? According to the National Sleep Foundation, which actually champions sleep and researches sleep, they recommend between 7 and 9 hours of sleep per night for adults over age 18. So when I discovered that, being a measurement geek and also using a Fitbit, I discovered that Fitbit can measure the quality and the quantity of your sleep, although not as accurate as a sleep lab. So I made a commitment. I'm going to try and get that between 7 and 9 hours of sleep a night. And I started recording how much sleep I got, and then also recording how did I feel the next day. Am I irritable? Am I able to concentrate? Am I feeling productive? And I discovered that my sweet spot of sleep was 7 hours and 39 minutes. So then I've tried to make a commitment to getting 7 hours and 39 minutes a night of sleep. And that meant that I had to change some of my habits around, like not looking at my mobile phone right before bed and actually kicking it out of the bedroom, as Aliza will tell you in a moment, and replacing it with this moonbeam alarm clock. And I'll tell you, I've committed to this, and when I do commit to getting my sleep, I feel great. Honestly, in the last couple of days, it's been quite hectic, and I'm a little bit out of my sleep routine, and I really, really, really feel it. So getting enough sleep is really super important. Start there. The next thing is, I'd say, sitting is the new smoking. All right. Now that phrase is attributed to Dr. James Levine, who is the director of the Mayo Clinic, Arizona State University Obesity and Solutions Initiative. He's the inventor of the treadmill desk. And that phrase was really popularized by a popular TED Talk by Silicon Valley person, Nilo Merchant. And so if you were to look at the fine print of the diagram that is on the left, you would see the array of physical harm that you cause by this sedentary lifestyle of sitting for more than an hour at a time at your chair. And if you think about it, we in the nonprofit sector, a lot of nonprofits have sitting disease, where we're sitting from 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day or more. And that can lead to colon cancer, heart disease, poor circulation, and brain fog. And so you might be skeptical about this sort of idea about how do you incorporate, more movement and more standing. Why should I do that? So the study that's on the right is a study of the impact of physical activity on the brain. And the scan that's there on the left, the one that's dark, that's a brain that's been sitting quietly for 20 minutes. And the brain on the right, the one that's all lit up, that one is after a 20-minute walk, okay? So the brain on the left is dark. Maybe it's depressed. It's probably having trouble coming up with some great grant proposal ideas. And the one on the right is happy. The synapses are firing, lots of innovation, lots of great ideas, because they've taken a 20-minute walk. So you have to ask yourself, what kind of brain do you want to bring to your work? Or what kind of brain do you want your staff to bring to your work and your stakeholders? So a couple of tips really quickly to stop sitting. Try a standing desk, okay? And you'll see in the photograph there, that's they don't have to be expensive. You can hack one out of a paper carton and a music stand. You want to make sure that your standing desk is ergonomically correct, or you'll create more muscle problems. You don't try to stand all at once. You want to kind of ease into the amount of time that you're standing. And also, as you begin to stand more, you'll notice that your feet are going to get sore. So you might consider getting a foot pad for your feet. Another idea is try to walk more throughout your day. Don't think about, walking as exercise or taking a break. It's really a part of your work methods or your work repertoire, if you will. So number one easiest way to do this is to stop using your computer keyboard as a lunch tray. Take a 20-minute walk during the lunch hour. You'll feel much better in the afternoon and you'll be way more productive. And there are numerous studies that have found that. I'm a huge fan of the Fitbit, and what you see there is the new one, the Fitbit Charger 2. And what it does is, according to CDC research, to avoid the hazards of having this sedentary lifestyle, you need to walk at least 250 steps every hour. So what the Fitbit does, it prompts you at 10 minutes to the hour. If you've been sedentary, there's a little stick figure man that pops up, and it tells you to go get your 250 steps. And then when you go do it, it gives you positive feedback that says, Beth, you've crushed it. You earned your 250 steps. And yesterday when we were at TechSoup, the community manager from Fitbit was there and actually raffled off a Fitbit. But she told me that at the Fitbit offices, every day at 10 minutes to the hour, everybody gets up from their desks and walks around and then goes back to work. Now, you might think that's a little bit distracting, but it's actually like rebooting your computer and keeps you kind of on track. The other way to get more movement into your work life is try walking meetings, okay? And if you haven't tried walking meetings, pick the best type of walking meeting to experiment with. And I would try doing a whole group, your whole staff. I would do a one-on-one, maybe a check-in meeting. If you have to take notes, bring along a pen and paper, or maybe dictate your notes into your mobile phone. You don't actually have to walk outside all the time. You can actually find walks inside of your office building, and some nonprofit offices actually have walking trails inside their buildings. I mentioned already some points about note-taking, and if you do plan to go for a walk, wear comfortable shoes. It's not very comfortable to walk in high heels, and bring some water with you. So those are just a few tips around the wellness triad, and I'm going to turn it over to Aliza to talk about tech wellness.
Yes, my favorite topic, tech wellness. Favorite topic, but not always a positive story to tell. I can tell you right now that after 25 plus years on the computer, I now have arthritis in my neck. It's directly attributed to my technology use. And this is dating way back before cell phones and mobile phones and looking at our digital devices happened, but that's exacerbated it. So in terms of tech wellness, take a look at this diagram here. This shows the kind of weight and stress we put on ourselves physically because of our technology. So often we think of technology interference as something a little bit more mental about our attention, but it can be a physical stressor. And in addition, it could be an emotional stressor. I mean, how many times do you go through your Facebook feed or your Twitter feed, particularly right now, and just think, I'm so stressed out over the news that is just permeating. So there's a lot of ways that technology directly and indirectly feeds into your physical and your mental, emotionally, and even spiritual stress. So what do? Our biggest tip of all, which sounds so obvious, but most of us are not doing this, is to unplug regularly and as often as you can. Now that probably strikes fear into some of your hearts, and sometimes it does to me as well. But what I've noticed is we've become compulsive. We have become so unaware of how our technology is interfering with everything from our work, our ability to concentrate, to our relationships, and our ability to communicate with the person physically in front of us. So there's something called technoference, and that's literally the distractions that we experience because we hear the notification beep or we see a notification flash on the screen and our eyes are drawn to it. We're literally not paying attention to the meeting or the conversation. And that's affecting us at home, that's affecting us at work. So we recommend that you turn off your device at designated times during the day, during your work week, on the weekend. Even stick it in your calendar with a reminder. Let that reminder beep you, and then have it as a notice to literally power down your devices. So protect your breaks, protect your vacations, protect your... Another thing we have is the charging station. So one of the things I do at home is I have a charging station at the door, so when all of my family members get home, we plug in our devices, we leave them at the door, then we walk away. This also creates a moment where we can be more aware when we're reaching for our device. It's not within physical reach. We have to walk through the house to go get to it. And that walking, sometimes we can call it the walk of shame. Where are you going? I'm going to go check my iPhone. Don't do it. But that gives you that time that you need to not be compulsive. It's a great way to remove your electronic devices from the kitchen table, for example. Another tip is no electronics in the bedroom. It sounds simple, but we've all invaded our bedrooms with some form of electronics. It used to be the TV, and some of us still have TVs in our bedroom. That disrupts your sleep, but even worse is using your iPhone as an alarm clock or using it as your, let me wind down and watch some Netflix on my tablet. All of that is a distraction and an interruption of your brain waves, the cycle that you need to be able to fall asleep. And there's so much compulsion around just checking one last email and just one more, and then it's midnight, then it's 1 a.m., then it's 2 a.m., then you wake up when you finally do get to sleep, and you're checking it again, which causes a lot of stress. But we're not here to say that technology is bad. We love technology. And in fact, we see apps as agents of self-care. They can be used, apps on your mobile device, on your mobile devices and your computer can be used to help you in your self-care practices. For example, Headspace, Beth mentioned that earlier. It takes you through short, guided meditations that can help even the person who is so skeptical about meditation or afraid that they just don't know how. It guides you gently into a meditation practice.
You know,
and
I'm sorry, Nan, I would just have to, because I saw a question. The Headspace is really good if any of you have experienced feeling so overwhelmed at work that you're about to burst into tears or just like not even know what to do next. There are a couple of Headspace guided meditations that help you think about like calm down and what's your next priority task and take you through thinking about how to execute that task. And I have found that Headspace applied to right in the moment to be really, really useful.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. There are applications also. Well, Calm is similar to Headspace in the idea that it's creating some guided meditations for you. There's also some apps that produce white noise or background sounds, nature sounds, that you could plug in and calm down just by listening to these sounds. Another one is Desk Yogi, and that's software you put onto your computer, and every interval, like 15, 20 minutes, it will pop up a video that will demonstrate a simple stretch you can do right at your desk. And a lot of it does come from certain yoga moves, but even a person who doesn't like yoga but understands that you must take a break, take your eyes off the computer and move your body, could benefit from this. And there's another one that's not pictured here that you attach to your web browser, and it's called Fitbolt, F-I-T-B-O-L-T, Fitbolt. It does a similar thing. It pops up photos, step by step, how to do certain exercises right at your office or workstation. So hopefully you have a culture in your organization that encourages movement and you won't get funny looks. But we'll talk a little bit more about how to introduce this to the organization later. Another thing that helps reset your brain is get offline, get away from digital, not just shut it off, but go analog. And one of the things that Beth and I really enjoy is meditative art. There's lots of forms this takes. Maybe you're not an artist, and there are those adult coloring books, which are actually very relaxing. There are studies that show that doing the adult coloring book has almost a meditative effect. But we also have picked up the pens and the paint, and the left is Zentangle, and that's a technique of meditative art that Beth is just amazing at. You can see these beautiful pieces that she's created, but it's sort of a no judgment, anything goes. Go with the flow art with a couple of guidelines to get you started. On the right hand side are examples of things that I've created, and I would say that neither of us have ever considered ourselves as artists, but we find that by doing something physical and tangible with our hands has taken our out of that stressful space of constant response to being overly connected to electronics. So you may want to give this a try, even if art is not your forte. I just bought a bunch of paints and started putting paint on canvas. And again, go with it with no judgment. And last of all, a tip that we really feel is essential is when it comes down to it, you are experiencing stress, yes, from certain things that are beyond your control, but most is based on the choices you make in your work and in your life. There are choices that you can make to prioritize what's truly important to you. Write down exactly what you feel are your highest priorities in life overall. And those really should be yourself and taking care of yourself, your family and your loved ones, your friends, above things like work. And the reason is, without those first priorities, you cannot replenish your energy. You do not have the support network and the nurturing and the support that you need to be able to sustain in order to do good work. So both of us, Beth and I, experienced the loss of our fathers just about a year apart. And that woke us both up to the fact that it prioritize where we place our energy and attention so that we are fortified to do the work that we do.
Great. So we've just covered some tips around for individuals, nonprofit professionals, and ways that you can practice self-care. We talked about the wellness triad. We talked about technology wellness. We talked about mindfulness, and we talked about balancing work and with life and family relationships. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some things that you can do for yourself in terms of self-care and how to bring that into the workplace, and then ways to make that spread within the workplace. So, so the first tip here is around how, we're so busy at work. I don't know about many nonprofits, many people these days. The modern workplace suffers from something called collaborative overload. And what this is are scheduled back-to-back meetings, this endless parade of emails. And so it's really more difficult than ever to kind of carve out that solo thinking and reflection time, which is super important for things like, writing grant proposals, creative planning, reflecting on your program, as opposed to a lot of quick things sort of flying through you. And so I don't know about you, but have you ever left empty white spaces on your calendar to do this kind of work, and then all of a sudden find that it's been taken up and that it's been disappeared with people wanting to meet with you, or phone calls and other distractions? So one tip is to schedule power hours with yourself where you will tackle that sort of work. I actually schedule out what I call green time, where where it's my writing time or my thinking time, where I'm not looking at the technology or where I'm not available. So a way of setting boundaries. Another technique is to kind of work with your energy flow. Now there's something that we call ultradian rhythms, and that's the opposite of circadian rhythms. So circadian rhythms are our day-night cycles, and that's what happens when if we fly across the world, and it's the reason why our clock gets out of whack. We're up at night and we're sleeping during the day. But during the day, our bodies work in these things called ultradian rhythms. And what these are 90 to 120 minute reps where we're able to concentrate and able to get things done. And then our concentration kind of dips and falls. And what happens is a lot of us just sort of sit and we try to power through it and fight it without taking a break. And that kind of doesn't allow us to bounce back or have that resilience. So if you can think about scheduling your work in these 90 to 120 minute reps and then taking a 10 or 15 minute break, you'll be way more productive. Now, I know that's kind of difficult to do that in the workplace where you have a lot of meetings, but I know we have one organization. It's an arts education organization in New York State that we interviewed, and what they did is they followed this pattern and they applied it when scheduling organizational meetings. And they had people kind of keep track of their peak productivity times and when there were dips, and they tried to schedule their group meetings around that. Even if you just take a few minutes brain break, that will really help you power back. The other thing is taking breaks. A real break is taking a vacation, okay? So I have been guilty of this for a number of years, I would look at my vacation time. I would have my suitcase of my vacation stuff, and then I have another suitcase of the work and books that I was going to read for work, that I was going to pack and do because I'm going to have more time. And maybe checking into the email and not setting boundaries around what I was going to respond to when I was on vacation. So in effect, I might have taken a vacation, but it wasn't a real vacation. So you will be far more productive if you are able to put boundaries around your vacation time and take that vacation time. And sometimes it's really hard because, you have to start preparing in advance. One of the things that I do is I actually block out my vacation time 6 months to a year in advance, and I protect it like a dog with a bone. And so if a client or somebody asks me, oh, can you do something during this time, I can say, no, that's during my vacation time. And then as the vacation time starts to come up, I start to try to prepare and make sure that things are wrapped up and let people know that I'm going to be away. And I have a policy of not responding to email during vacation. And that has really helped me come back to my job, to my work, just with a whole better attitude. And the other tip is around setting boundaries. You really need to stand firm and protect yourself in order to be productive. So saying no is really, really important. And all of us in the nonprofit sector, we're kind of probably got here because we want to help people and we want to be generous with our time. Or else we might have a boss that may not even know that they've overloaded us and we're just, doing knee-jerk yeses. So you really want to start to draw these clear lines and know when your workload's going overboard and begin to have a conversation with your boss or with other people about that workload. So let's pause here for a quick second before we jump into the workplace examples, see if there's any questions. Did you notice anything in the chat, Aliza?
I saw something that was specific to one person's experience working at the nonprofit, sort of her secondary thing. And I was starting to type back to say, well, all these tips that we're giving can address sort of any scenario, whether you are an executive director or just a professional working within a department or a volunteer with a nonprofit organization. So in a sense, a lot of this information is interchangeable depending on your role. You could be a board member. You could even be a funder. So I was hoping that after she saw some of this, that she would gain some things that address directly what she needed.
Great. So 5 minutes we have left. Maybe we can quickly go through the slides about the workplace.
Okay. There's another question. How can recent graduates entering the nonprofit sector practice self-care and advance his or her career? Again, I think that some of these things are extremely specific to particular situations. That's a great question. Let's talk a little bit about the workplace and see if we can address those questions as we go over this. So very quickly, moving from self-care to weak care, you as an individual practicing self-care could go into a workplace that may not support your self-care and things derail. So what you're hoping for and looking for is that an organization will go through an assessment process and try to understand what the culture really is like and figure out ways of being more supportive to self-care. Again, we said at the beginning that self-care or weak care within an organization helps prevent burnout organization-wide, helps prevent turnover, increases productivity, increases and improves outcomes. All of that hits the bottom line. People are healthier, less medical insurance claims. So if you think about the monetary benefits of this, I mean, it's pretty significant, pretty substantial that monetarily it's saving an organization money by engaging in weak care.
Great. So just a couple of quick examples. Leadership and employee engagement is really is supportive of self-care, and it's easy to establish that kind of culture of self-care, but sometimes you don't. But you can also make change from the ground up. And this is an example from an organization called Haz, which is a Jewish organization that focuses on sustainability. And our colleague, Gina, who's pictured right there, the blonde, she is an athlete and a marathon runner, and she wanted to get her organization walking to kind of cure sitting disease. So she started this thing called the Wednesday Afternoon Walk and announced it, and no one showed up. And then she realized that, oh, it needs to be on the organizational calendar. So she got it on the organizational calendar. And then people started showing up, maybe one person the first week, a couple of people the next week, and so on. And so what she did is she urged her colleagues, after they did the walk and they enjoyed it, to bring other colleagues. And before you know it, this was sort of established as part of what they were doing. So even if you know, the senior leaders may not be supportive of it, you can make change from the ground up.
So another one that we really love is communal meals. So an organization in Canada that went on to the Canadian Craigslist, found a crock pot, purchased it, and began organizing meals for everyone. And every Monday, they have Crockpot Monday. Now, the meals have to be vegan and gluten-free so that everyone can partake. But it's become a bit of a perk. All the employees love it. Plus, they tend to mention it to others who are about to be hired. So candidates are hearing about it, and they think of it as a great benefit. So by doing this, by strengthening the feeling of community within your organization, you are attending to an aspect of self-care. Plus, it's healthy eating, which is part of the wellness triad. So you're really hitting a lot of the high points in terms of we care.
Yeah, and also, as Jason Shim, a fellow board member from NTEN who works for Pathways in Canada, mentioned that word started to get around that his organization does this, and when people were applying for jobs, they would ask, why are you applying? He said, well, we heard you have this cool thing called Crockpot Mondays, and we wanted to work in an organization that builds community. So it helps attract talent. And finally, one quick way to get started. We, in the book and also on our site, we mentioned the different burnout and self-care assessments. And some organizations have been using those actually to bring to staff retreats where they have staff go through the assessments and then develop self-care plans and then become accountability buddies for themselves. The example here comes from an organization that read the book. They're called Open to Act. They're a theater company in New York City, very small, 6 staff people. They did this, but then their executive director also got input from the staff for ideas on what they could do to help make working at their organization more friendly and a feeling of more community and less stressful. And what that led to was the staff wanted a workplace flexibility policy, that they didn't have to just clock in 9 to 5 every day, that they could, as long as they delivered their work, could have more flexible hours. So that's a simple way to get started. And with that, are there any other questions that we haven't answered? Or before we turn hold?
And I'm looking through really quickly. Does your book guide you through the process, telling your board they're overloading you with their ideas they want you to execute? Well, it does address different techniques that you can use to manage upward. So whether you're a professional and you need to have a conversation about this with your director, or whether you're a director and you want to have a conversation with your board, the way you present the information can vary. So it's not just a trickle down, it's a trickle up process, and we do give several examples.
Right, I'm thinking about the one in Ohio from my colleague Susan, and she's really smart. What they did is that they, as part of their strategic planning process, had the board look at well-being cultural well-being in the workplace and how that was linked to reaching their other program outcomes. So there was a lot of education taking place around that, and they were able to link it specifically to performance outcomes in their programs.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Hey, I just saw this comment about the personal craziness index. Someone got really stressed out when they tried adult coloring books because they were afraid they were going to choose the wrong colors. I think the most important thing about meditative art and adult coloring books, and really anything, if you pick up pottery or I'm about to try macrame, is the no judgment rule. You're doing this for that feeling of tangible and for going analog and sort of getting back to basics and just rebooting your brain. It's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's not about being precise.
The value of the Zentangles and why I was drawn to it. It was actually developed by somebody, a practicing Buddhist monk and a graphic design artist. And it actually, in the whole process, it talks about no judgment, there's no mistakes. And you don't even have to, as part of the supplies, you don't have an eraser because there's no right or wrong to it. And the idea, I think the problem is that a lot of us had maybe a stressful kindergarten where we did a drawing and the kindergarten teacher said, oh, what is that? So we told ourselves that we can't draw or that our drawing sucked. So if you want to use drawing for stress reduction, the first thing you need to do is to send your inner critic on a vacation to Hawaii, okay? And then just start.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
and then send me there too.
So
I do want to go back to the university question because I am a professor and I do teach this to my grad students. And I happen to give, and I could teach all, I teach a whole semester on this. But I think the number one most important thing for recent graduates is walking the line between showing that you are interested and you will do anything to also setting limits on what you'll do. So that's also being strategic and being very clear about what your goals are, opening the lines of communication once you are hired, having that weekly check-in with your boss, establishing that good relationship, and not presenting with an attitude that don't use self-care as a way to not do work. We have, it's called self-care abusers. So, so it's walking that very fine line. Another thing also is that I teach my students that some organizations do have a culture where where they burn people out, and other organizations do not. So if you're interviewing for a job, you want to pay attention to what the culture is and ask questions around workload and maybe take a look at the employee handbook and just get a sense of where they are. And maybe if you are looking for a place that has, it's a great match for your career, but it's also important for you to find a place that supports well-being in the workplace, look for those indicators.
I think that's it. We've hit the time, and thank you, everyone, for sticking around.
Great. Well, I'm back on with my mic here. So thank you so very much, Beth and Aliza. I'm just actually going to change presenter over to me. Give me 1 second. Yes, again, so thank you, Beth and Aliza. We really appreciate it. I do personally, and I can tell by the comments that we're getting that everyone else did too. I learned a lot. I was standing up for quite a bit of this webinar, so I appreciate that bit of advice and all the other tips you gave us too. And as mentioned to everybody, we are going to share the recording with you. We'll send a follow-up email, the next day or so, which will have a link to the recording. And also, as mentioned, I wanted to give everyone here a chance, because I know we have got some Wild Apricot customers and people who are new to Wild Apricot, the chance to ask any questions. If you want to hang around, we'll do that. But me first say that if anyone is interested in our software, there is a 30-day free trial, and Terry will paste the link in the chat there. You can check that out. That'll take you to our website where you can enter your email, name, and organization, and you're on your way to try our software. And if you allow me to make a connection to the topic of technology and making friends with that, we think this could be part of some self-care with your work, because it'll take a lot of the administrative task and all the things that stress you out there off your plate.